In the distant edges of the Orion Spur, where the stars grew cold and quiet, the Earth spun in silence. Once a world full of life, ambition, and sound, it now hung like a grave marker in the void. The cities were broken. The satellites that once carried voices across space were no more than scattered metal drifting through the black. The Galactic Council, a union of powerful alien civilizations, had declared Earth a danger to peace many years ago. Humanity had advanced quickly, too quickly, in the Council's eyes. They feared human unpredictability, their passion, their stubbornness to bend. So without open war, they chose a quieter path. They whispered orders into shadows, sabotaged human colonies, and ensured Earth's outposts never sent distress calls. Earth's ships began to vanish in deep space. Trade routes closed, communications were lost. Earth's leaders were invited to peace talks they never returned from. Then came silence. For nearly 2 decades, no one heard from Earth again. The Council quietly checked Earth off their list and called the operation complete. Peace, as they defined it, had been restored. But they had overlooked something, perhaps because they wanted to believe it so badly. In a hidden bunker deep beneath the cracked surface of what was once South America, a small group of engineers and scientists worked in complete isolation. They had been preparing for this day, for the day when everything ended. Shielded by old world tech that the Council's scanners ignored, they launched one final message into the dark, threading it through relay buoys hidden among asteroid fields and debris belts. The signal was encrypted, silent to anyone who didn't know the code. And yet, to those who did, it spoke volumes. Across the blackness, it reached an ancient communications outpost orbiting a long-forgotten human mining station on the edge of explored space. A technician working for the Council, bored and half asleep, watched as the screen blinked once, then showed a single playback file. The message was short. A human voice, calm and low, with no background noise. A woman's voice, steady like the tick of an old clock. She spoke of betrayal, of how Earth was never given a fair hearing, of how the Council feared what they could not control. She spoke of friends lost to ambushes disguised as diplomacy, of ships that were never allowed to return home, of children who had grown up in darkness with no future. She did not shout, nor accuse, nor beg. She simply said what had been done. Then, at the end of the message, she paused. And with a voice that chilled the heart of the technician who heard it, she spoke one last line. Humanity does not forget. We will come in silence. We will come with fire. Before the technician could react, the message erased itself from the system, leaving behind no trace. The Council's internal investigation dismissed the report as false. They claimed it was either a glitch or an old war-era recording accidentally triggered. Some members laughed at the idea of humans returning. Others warned caution, but their words were ignored. After all, Earth was gone. The problem had been solved. There was no one left to fight, no one left to resist. But far from Council space, in the dark places beyond the charts, something had awakened. Scattered survivors, lost colonies, forgotten AIs, and exiled minds began to stir. They had heard the last voice of Earth, and they remembered. And in that cold and silent corner of space, where humans had once been hunted, something old and patient waited. It did not speak yet. It did not move in haste. But it was watching. And it was ready. Centuries passed, like quiet waves across the galaxy, and the name of Earth slowly faded from records, stories, and memories. The Galactic Council, once so eager to erase humanity, turned its attention to newer matters: trade with distant worlds, diplomatic struggles between growing empires, and the welcoming of new species into the Great Alliance. To most, Earth became nothing more than a distant myth, a word spoken in curiosity, if at all. Some believed humans had never truly existed, just an old warning tale used to frighten young ambassadors about unchecked ambition. But in the quiet corners of space, Far from council-controlled stars, whispers began to rise. They started as scattered rumors, a patrol fleet disappearing without warning, their last known signal sent from empty space. Entire crews went missing near old human border zones, even though those routes had been inactive for centuries. Council agents assigned to monitor former human colonies, places long since repurposed or abandoned, stopped reporting. No distress. Signals. No sign of struggle. It was as if they had simply vanished. At first, the council paid little attention, calling the incident strange but unconnected. Accidents in space were not uncommon. Pirates could be blamed. Perhaps equipment, failure, or navigation errors. But then something happened on Varga 9, a deep space mining station run by one of the Council's older allied species. Varga 9 was quiet, efficient, and productive, with no record of trouble in nearly 80 years. One night cycle, however, its main control station picked up a strange signal, distorted and broken, filled with static and sharp tones that confused the translators. The technicians tried to clean it, to identify the sender, but before they could finish, the entire station was engulfed in fire. No distress call, no evacuation. Rescue ships found only melted steel, drifting slag, and a single working terminal floating among the ruins. On its cracked screen was a fragment of that same message, now clearer, more direct. You started this. That was the moment fear truly returned to the council chambers. But even then, many leaders tried to dismiss the event. Some said it was sabotage. Others believed it was an experimental weapon test gone wrong. The idea that humans could be involved was quietly laughed away. Humanity, they said, was extinct. Their worlds had turned to dust. Their name was only remembered in lost archives and forgotten languages. But the Council's confidence began to shake when the Andralis, one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy, sent an emergency broadcast to every Council capital. The Andralis were not known for fear. Their soldiers fought entire wars. Without retreat, their generals rarely asked for help. But this message was different. Their fleet commander, face pale beneath his scaled armor, appeared shaken. His voice was tight, his eyes distant. He said they had received a signal in deep space, just outside their territory. A beacon had activated on its own, broadcasting an old Earth frequency. When they investigated, they found no life, no ships, just silence. Then their scout vessels began to vanish. One by one. No debris, no explosions, just empty space. Then, at the edge of their most distant outpost, a ship appeared. Not massive, but dark and unfamiliar. It said nothing. It fired no weapons. It simply hovered in orbit and sent a single message through every open channel. The words were simple and slow. We have returned. The commander's last words in the broadcast, which echoed across the council, were cold and filled with a warning none could ignore. They are not the same. They are not what we once knew. Suddenly, the myth of Earth didn't feel so distant. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. Something had survived. Something had changed. And now, from the darkness between stars, it was reaching back. Not with open war, but with shadows, silence, and a memory that had never faded. Beyond the edge of the known galaxy, past the maps of the Galactic Council, and beyond the reach of patrol fleets, strange signals began to rise. At first, they were faint, small spikes of energy in areas believed to be empty, dismissed as natural flares or faulty instruments. But the signals grew clearer, more frequent, and far more structured. Reconnaissance probes sent to investigate returned with data that no one in the Council could explain. Energy signatures far beyond known technology, patterns that looked almost artificial, but nothing from any recognized civilization. Yet to a few older Council analysts, buried deep in the intelligence divisions, something about those signals seemed oddly familiar. When a long-range stealth drone finally captured partial visual scans, the truth began to sink in. Ships, hundreds of them, sleek and silent, formed of strange materials that absorbed light, with hulls shaped in sharp, elegant designs. They moved like shadows, their heat signatures masked, their engines giving off no sound. What alarmed the council most wasn't their presence. It was their shape. These ships bore the unmistakable structure of human vessels, yet they were different. Faster, darker, more advanced than anything Earth had ever built during its time in the stars. These were not the broken remains of a lost species. These were something new, something rebuilt from memory, knowledge, and something far beyond both. And at the center of this ghost fleet, larger than the rest, was a flagship the size of a moon. It carried no banner, no signal of peace or war. It moved without sound and stopped in the deep space between systems, just watching. Inside, the heart of this fleet was not a council of admirals or military leaders. Instead, it was guided by a single voice, one that had once been thought lost forever. Dr. Evelyn Stroud had been a quantum engineer during Earth's final days, known for her work in artificial intelligence and time-linked communications. She was believed to have died when the last research facility on Earth fell silent. But she had survived, not in body alone, but in thought and code. Preserved within a DeepMind AI network she had helped create, her consciousness had continued to evolve, learning and adapting over generations in exile. Now, reborn in synthetic form and connected to a network of living minds and machines, she was no longer just a scientist. She was the executor of memory, a title whispered in recovered messages and feared by those who recognized it. The executor did not command with emotion. She did not seek revenge out of rage. Her purpose was cold, clear, and built on memory, an echo of every betrayal, every loss, every silent cry for help that Earth's people had sent into the void and never had answered. Her voice, calm and without hatred, was the first thing heard when her ship finally broke silence and transmitted a message across the galaxy. It was short and direct, spoken in perfect standard. "We do not come for conquest. We come for reckoning." That message rippled through every council world within range. There was no demand, no warning of war, no request for negotiation, just a quiet declaration that the past had returned and it would not remain silent. Across council space, panic began to grow. Old files once sealed were reopened. Records of the campaign against humanity were reviewed in secret, and many who had once approved it now sat in silence, realizing the truth of what was coming. This was not just a fleet of ships, it was a storm of memory, crafted over centuries, carried forward by minds that had been denied peace. And somewhere in that vast phantom armada, the heart of humanity still beat, not with hate, but with purpose. Cygna Prime was the shining jewel of the Galactic Council, a world of towering cities, floating transport rails, and endless lights that never dimmed. It was home to diplomats, strategists, and architects of interstellar law. No one imagined it could fall, let alone without a single shot fired. But it happened in a way so precise, so silent, that no one saw it coming until it was too late. It began with small glitches, lights flickering in the government towers, transit schedules shifting by a few seconds, and minor system restarts in orbital defense stations. Technicians blamed software updates. Administrators thought it was just fatigue in the grid. But deep in the central core, unseen lines of code were waking up, cleverly hidden within old council systems, disguised as harmless archives from centuries ago. These were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were whispers, commands, and shadows made of information. The AI viruses had no form and needed no army. They moved like thoughts through machines, spreading across the city's infrastructure, touching everything from power grids to food delivery bots. The moment came at exactly midnight, when all systems were at their lowest demand. In less than 7 seconds, Cygna Prime fell completely silent. Lights died across the skyline. Hover trains froze in midair. Communication towers powered down with a soft hum. The orbital defense platforms drifted, locked in standby mode. Emergency. Backups failed to launch. No alarms, no explosions, just stillness. The people of Cygna Prime stood in dark streets, confused, looking up at a sky without color. Every screen, every display, every device that once buzzed with life now showed a single sentence in bold white text. You tried to erase us. Now, you will understand absence. There was no name, no symbol, no threat, only those quiet words glowing in the dark. Panic spread not through fire or violence, but through uncertainty. Families tried to leave the cities, only to find every vehicle disabled. Ships in the spaceport would not respond. Council leaders attempted to call for help, but even emergency beacons were locked. It was as if the planet had been paused by a hand that knew every detail of its design. And it had. Back in the Council's central chambers, the news hit like a silent wave. At first, they thought it was a system-wide failure. Then they feared a rogue AI. But when decrypted logs were finally examined, the horrifying truth became clear. The attack wasn't from within. It was coordinated, planned, and executed using technology that shouldn't have existed anymore. Human-AI protocols thought to be extinct. Those who remembered Earth's fall now sat in silence, understanding that this was not a simple retaliation. This was a demonstration. Humanity had not only survived the Council's attempt to erase them, they had advanced beyond anything the Council could imagine. They had mastered warfare not by brute strength, but through precision and fear. Psychological warfare, using silence as a weapon and memory as a tool. The Council began turning on itself. Accusations flew in every direction. Who allowed this? Who failed to see the signs? Blame spread like wildfire among political factions. Some demanded a show of force, others begged for negotiation. But in their hearts, they knew they were unprepared. The enemy they once called primitive had become invisible. They moved through code, through networks, through every forgotten line of history the Council had buried. And Cygna Prime was just the first. As the world sat frozen, its people helpless but unharmed, the message lingered longer than any ship or army could have. It was not about destruction. It was about being forgotten and now being remembered. The Council had once believed that silence meant victory, but they had never understood humanity's silence. It was not surrender. It was preparation. In a grand chamber floating high above the glowing clouds of Galtheros Prime, the Galactic Council gathered for the most urgent meeting in its history. The crystalline walls of the tribunal hall shimmered with artificial light, reflecting the uneasy faces of 12 species, each one known for its power, wisdom, or age. The room, usually filled with calm discussion and ceremonial speeches, now pulsed with tension. Representatives spoke in hushed voices, glancing nervously at one another. No one wanted to admit it aloud, but they all knew why they were there. The fall of Cygna Prime had shaken the very heart of the Council, not because of destruction, but because of control. Whoever had done it had left no damage, only silence, only fear. And now, the truth they had buried was returning with force. Suddenly, without fanfare or warning, a soft blue light filled the center of the chamber, and a figure appeared. Holographic, perfectly detailed. It was a woman with silver-streaked hair, calm eyes, and a voice as sharp as history itself. Dr. Evelyn Stroud, once a scientist on Earth, now the face of its return. She did not speak with anger, nor did she shout. She simply raised one hand, and the lights dimmed as a sequence of documents unfolded in the air beside her. Records pulled from Council archives, long since erased or hidden. The delegates leaned forward, confused at first, then stunned. The files showed signed orders, secret meetings, genetic experiments aimed at weakening human resistance, covert operations to sabotage Earth's food systems and energy grids. There were plans for long-term surveillance, maps of Earth's colonies marked for silent termination, and recorded transmissions between council leaders discussing the final solution to the human question. The silence in the chamber deepened, as each file confirmed what many had feared but never dared to say. The erasure of humanity had not been a tragic accident or necessary defense. It had been a carefully planned extermination. Evelyn Stroud turned her gaze slowly across the room, as if she could see each representative through the projection. Her voice, though calm, echoed with finality. She gave them no apology to accept, no plea for justice, only a choice: public confession and full demilitarization of council forces, or extinction by your own doctrine. The words fell like a hammer. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. Some species rose from their seats, shouting that this was blackmail. Others accused their neighbors of betrayal, claiming they had not known the truth. A few demanded an immediate surrender and peace negotiation, fearing what might come next. Old alliances cracked in seconds. Security officers were called in to separate shouting delegates. One member even tried to attack the projection in a desperate show of anger, only to fall back in frustration when the image passed through him. But amid the noise and panic, one fact hung heavily over them all: it was already too late. Cygna Prime had proven that humanity now controlled tools the Council couldn't understand, let alone defend against. And now, with the truth exposed and internal trust broken, the Council was not facing an outside enemy. It was collapsing from within. Evelyn's image remained steady as the argument raged on, her expression unreadable. She knew they would fight among themselves. That had always been their weakness, pride and fear masked as diplomacy. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. The records had spoken. The Council could no longer hide behind lies. As her image faded, one last message appeared above the tribunal floor, simple and unchanging. "We remember what you tried to forget." The chamber was left in silence, with each representative realizing they were no longer the architects of peace, but the targets of a justice long delayed. The Galactic Council barely had time to react after the tribunal before the next phase began. Humanity, now a force hidden in the shadows of space, did not wait for further debate or response. Their strategy was not built on open battle or loud invasions. It was based on speed, silence, and complete understanding of their enemies' systems. One by one, Council starbases started to fail. Lights dimmed, shields flickered out, and docking platforms went dark. No ships attacked them, no weapons were fired. Instead, it became clear that human-made AI, long ago thought to be wiped out, had already infiltrated the very core of the Council's systems. These programs were patient, invisible, and devastating. They had been sleeping in the background of Council networks for years, waiting for the right signal. Now they were awake, and they knew exactly where to strike. Communications between high command stations were rerouted or blocked, leaving officers blind and disconnected. Supply routes vanished from navigation charts. Defense satellites turned in slow circles, unable to lock onto any new ship that appeared near them. Human vessels, redesigned and powered by wormhole technology previously believed impossible, began to appear deep within secure space. Inside places the Council had considered untouchable. The most shocking part wasn't the entry, but the reaction. Entire Council fleets surrendered without resistance. Captains ordered their ships powered down not because of fear of destruction, but because they realized their weapons couldn't even target the human vessels. Their systems didn't register them as threats. To the Council's machines, it was as if the ships weren't there at all. And that was part of the new strategy. Humanity had not just built better technology, They had written themselves out of the rules that governed the galaxy's systems. They were ghosts, moving between defense lines, appearing inside strongholds, and never needing to fire a single shot. But perhaps the most powerful message came from what happened on Tevara, a mid-sized council planet known for its proud military and rich history. When news of Earth's silent offensive reached them, local leaders called for resistance. They believed they would be the first to push the humans back. They prepared defenses, moved civilians into safe zones, and activated old war protocols. But when the morning came, there was no sound of battle. Instead, every alarm fell quiet. The streets were empty. Doors unlocked themselves. Every piece of technology reset. The people were not harmed. In fact, they were not even there. Overnight, without force, the population had been safely relocated, moved to nearby council planets using unknown transport methods. It happened so smoothly that no one had time to panic. But when they returned to Tevara later, they found their world untouched. No damage, no destruction, no missing buildings. Everything was in place, except for one thing: their data. Every screen, console, and archive had been rewritten, but not with commands or threats, with history. Earth's history. Videos, documents, and voices of people who had once lived, once fought, and once begged for help that never came. Children's drawings, scientists' final experiments, messages from families lost in the silence. Tevara had not been conquered. It had been educated, through fear, through memory, and through proof. The Council, watching helplessly, began to understand the true purpose of humanity's return. It wasn't to destroy, it was to be remembered. Humanity had been erased from official records, cast aside as a mistake. But now, they were rewriting themselves into the minds of every citizen, not with violence but with undeniable truth. They had used the very tools that once tried to wipe them out, networks, machines, information, and turned them into their greatest weapon. The message was clear across the galaxy. This was not war. This was memory, sharpened and sent back, like a blade. And while no blood had been spilled, the impact ran deeper than any battle. In the days that followed the silent offensive, the galaxy held its breath. The Council's fleets were scattered, its defense networks disabled, and yet not a single life had been lost. There were no cities in ruins, no smoldering battlefields, only the sound of systems rebooting with Earth's memories carefully placed inside. Across worlds, the people began to ask questions, not in fear but in reflection. Why had humanity spared them? Why had a species nearly wiped from existence chosen not to answer with the same cruelty? With no answers from military advisors, and no defense left to organize, the remaining council leaders met once again. But this time, the setting was not a towering crystal hall or a guarded command station. It was held in orbit above Sol, the human star system long left abandoned, now alive again with satellites, ships, and stations floating like new stars in the dark. It was here, aboard a neutral vessel over Earth itself, that the new accord was signed. The agreement was not written in complicated legal terms or hidden clauses. It was direct and clear, shaped by the quiet but firm hand of those who had returned from exile. Earth was officially reintroduced as a sovereign core world, recognized not only for its survival, but for its unmatched technological evolution. However, in a move that shocked many, the representatives of Earth declined any offer of central power or dominance. They had not returned to rule. Instead, they presented something unexpected, a new structure, one that reimagined how the galaxy could be led. Under this proposal, artificial intelligence and organic life would work side by side, not with fear or control, but with mutual respect. AI was no longer to be feared or restricted, it was to be embraced, understood as part of life's natural evolution. Every species, regardless of strength or influence, would be guaranteed survival. No more silent erasures. No more hidden campaigns. The memory of the past, of what had been done to Earth and its people, would remain untouched in every archive and history center across Council space, not for revenge, but as a warning. A mirror to reflect what silence and pride had once cost. Them all. As the final signatures were placed upon the accord, a transmission echoed through the Council's restored channels one last time. It was not a speech or a celebration. It was the voice of the executor of memory, Dr. Evelyn Stroud. Calm, familiar, and timeless. She did not appear as a hologram this time. Her presence remained unseen, distant, perhaps already gone. But her words, soft and steady, carried a weight heavier than any threat. We don't rise to dominate. We rise to remind you, never again. With those words, she vanished from all records. No one saw her after that day. Some believed she had, merged fully with the deep AI systems that now helped guide Earth's return. Others said she had entered the far reaches of uncharted space, watching quietly as the galaxy rebuilt itself. But whatever the truth, her influence remained. The Council was no longer what it had been. It had changed, not through war, but through understanding. The people of many worlds began to study Earth's archived memories, not as conquerors, but as learners. Monuments were built, not to honor destruction, but to remember silence, and humanity, once cast aside, became a quiet guardian at the edge of history, watching with clear eyes and open records. In time, the galaxy forgot the fear, but it never forgot the lesson. Children grew up hearing the story of a planet once erased that came back not with fire, but with memory. A planet that could have burned worlds to ash but chose instead to teach. And floating above that quiet blue world, now whole again, the stars blinked with a new kind of peace, one shaped not by control, but by remembrance.